Since sex and anger represent power, claiming them goes against traditional teachings that women should be passive, receptive, and prioritize attending to others over any form of self expression. Women who do find ways to declare their anger and assert their sexuality find they feel more powerful and in touch with who they are in relation to others. Both anger expression and sexual assertion are acts of self-definition and freedom. I wanted to open this episode up reading a bit from The Anger Advantage, the surprising benefits of anger and how it can change a woman's life. It's written by three authors, Cox, Bruckner, and Stabb. So this conversation doesn't include sex, but it does include anger. So we'll be talking about the gifts of anger and relationships and self-regulation. Enjoy the show. One more thing. I have a 4-week introduction workshop series on A Course in Miracles that starts on Tuesday, September 27th. You can find out more at thefeelgoodinstitute.com/workshops. I'll put the link in the description. All right, enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Feel Good, the podcast. You are in for a treat today. As you already know from the title of this episode, it's about women, anger, and power. And I'm excited to introduce to you my guest on this topic. Now, before we jump into it, let me just say this really quickly. This conversation is about, like I said, women, anger, and power. So it is a safe space for full expression and authenticity. With that, there might be some profanity and other language that may not be suitable for children. But as women, we are centered enough, and this is not going to be a space or a place or a time for that. So I'm not going to ask my guests to hold back in order to make anyone else feel comfortable or to be more palatable or to avoid offending anyone like we probably have to do most of the time. Okay? All right, so now to my guests. First up, I have Patricia, who lives in Seattle, and she is a retired family doctor and documentary filmmaker. Hi, Patricia, and welcome.
Hi, Malika. Thank you.
Next up, we have Jennifer. Jennifer is a dental hygienist, also in Seattle area. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, everyone.
And last but not least, we have Rima, who is an accountant and a teacher by trade, and she is down in Glendale, California. Welcome, Rima.
Hello.
All right, so you cannot see us if you're listening to the podcast, but we are from different generations, different ethnic backgrounds, as our guests will get into a little bit later. But my guests have, besides being women, they also have one other thing in common, and that is they have a pretty intimate relationship and they're in touch with their anger. All right. So just to give you all some background, I started this journey of uncovering my own anger maybe about 2 years ago. And it started with reading a book which I'll get into a little bit later. So I'm really excited to learn from you all and to share my experience on my journey to reclaiming and getting more in touch with my anger personally. So with that, the first question is going to be to you, Patricia. And that is, what is your background? Like, where did you grow up? And what did you learn about anger from your family?
I grew up in New York City, in Queens, and my background, but I live in Seattle. I've lived in Seattle since 1992, before that in Spokane, Washington. So I grew up in a family that was half Eastern European. My family was from Eastern Europe and Jewish, and my mother was a WASP with Mayflower stock family. And so the way that anger was expressed in my family was very different. And also the way anger is expressed in New York compared to Seattle is very different. So I grew up in two different areas in terms of anger and also two different sides of my family in terms of anger.
Well, when you say very different in your family, what does that mean?
So my father's family was very expressive. And so you said, like, there's toilet paper coming out of your, backside, go, like go put it away. Whereas in my mind, it's like you'd say that, there's spinach in your teeth, there's whatever, and in fact, in New York City, one time I was literally across a very large street in Manhattan, a very busy street, and my shoelace was untied. And there was a lot of people on the street. This woman from literally across the street yells, "Girlie, you are gonna trip over that. Tie your shoelace. You're gonna fall on your face," literally from across the street. But in Seattle, I don't know if somebody would even let you know that your shoelace is untied. And on my mother's side of the family, they might speak quietly about some toilet paper hanging, hanging out or something. And they would maybe be a little upset that that was happening to you, or angry that that was happening to you, but they might not necessarily tell you.
And which side did you take after growing up?
I think I took mostly my father's side until I moved to Seattle and learned that you don't have to express your anger quite so passionately.
Okay, but we want to hear about some of those passionate stories too soon.
Yeah.
We'll get to some of that. All right, thank you, Patricia. What about you, Jennifer?
So I am Vietnamese. Both of my parents immigrated here from Vietnam shortly after the war. So my mom came here by herself. She didn't have any family. My dad came with a slew of his siblings, and we all lived in one household together. So yeah, a lot of people, a lot of different personalities. I think my parents, they did end up arguing a lot when we were younger. But it was kind of that secrecy. Like they didn't do it in front of everyone else. It would be like they would upset one another and then wait until they were in private to talk about it. It wasn't until everyone had slowly started moving out and it was just my parents and my brother that they really started to argue just openly. I remember being a child once and just saying, "Shut up." Like I was like 4 or 5 years old and I just sat there and they were arguing. I literally just like, "Shut up." And I think that was my first like experience with anger, like me expressing my own anger, where I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so tired of listening to you guys argue about the same stuff over and over." So I think, throughout the years, my relationship with anger has really changed. It's gone up, it's gone down. I think I'm at a place now where I feel like it's really stable and I have a good grasp of it.
Ooh, I can't wait to hear how you got there. But I am curious, when you told your parents to shut up, how did they respond to you? Did they listen to you? Did they blow
Oh
you
yeah,
off?
they were totally shocked. They were shocked. Instantly, the room went quiet.
Okay. So they respected it. They heard
Yeah,
you.
I guess so.
Or at least from the shock of it all. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay, and Rima, last but not least.
I grew up in Lebanon and until I was 15, and then we came here. So over there, um, the two differences between my mom and my dad is my mom was very emotional, expressed all of her emotions pretty openly in front of everybody, and my father was very calm, but um when he wanted something, he was very authoritative. So he would issue an order: you leave, you come, you do this, you do that. He's a bank manager. He's used to, being in charge. So that was the two distinct differences between the two. And I sort of combined and took the best out of both of them. And I was very outspoken in my childhood, more somewhat argumentative, and if that included me being feeling things were unfair, it kind of anger sort of played into my expression. And so I preferred lack of emotion except for anger. It is how I express things. I did not like the emotional, outbursts that my mom had, but I did but I was outspoken about my feelings in a less emotional way, other than anger. if I was to, so anger was the only allowed emotion I had in my childhood is what I think I want to say. And it took a long time. I married someone who came from a very quiet family here in the US. And obviously over the years, I learned how to use the anger to get things, to get what I wanted. Okay. But it didn't really serve me in family situations. So over the years, I've learned how to like choose the moments of when to express my anger for the most part. I don't say I would have it would be the case all the time, but for the most part, that was a learning process for me.
Gotcha. When I'm looking forward to some of this learning. So for those that are listening, this is Malika. I'm African American, and to talk about my family of origin, my parents did not live in the same home together. And it was so interesting listening to you, Jennifer. I remember when I was in kindergarten or first grade, they were arguing in front of me. And I don't remember what I said, but I just remember being so worked up and like probably asked them to stop or was crying or something like that. So I don't know if anger was it, but what I noticed in my family pattern, especially on my mom's side, is if people were angry with each other, it was a fracture in the relationship. So they may just stop talking. Like there's people in my family that may have been estranged or not talked for 4 or 5 years. And then if somebody is sick or on the deathbed, then there's like amends and all that stuff. And so I didn't like that. I wanted everybody to get along. And so I think part of my disassociation from anger was wanting that connection and wanting people to get along. And thinking that if there was anger, that it would mean like a loss of relationship or a loss of connection. On the flip side, though, like I just want to also mention my mom. In school, they're like, if somebody hits you, tell a teacher. I wasn't raised like that. Like, my mom's side, they are fighters, and they're not fighters like bullies to initiate, but they're fighters. If somebody starts something with them, they're going to finish it. This is my grandmother. This is my great grandmother. This is my mom. This is my uncle. Like, a lot of people in my family, my mom's side, they're fiery, lovely people. I didn't have quite that same thing. So I remember being picked on in preschool by this girl. And she one time was bold enough to hit me in front of my mom. And this had been going on for quite some time. And my mom was like, look, if somebody hits you, hit them back. This little girl would hit me. I wouldn't hit her back. And so the time she hit me, while my mom was there in front of my mom looked at me because we had gotten to an understanding. My mom was like, look, I'm tired of hearing about this. If you don't hit this little girl back, I'm going to spank your butt. And so the little girl hit me, and I looked up at my mom, and she gave me that look like, you know what your choices are. And so then that's what made me finally hit her back. So in some ways, my mom was trying to support and activate in me, right? Like this thing about anger as far as setting boundaries. And so that's what I want to get into is, there's this book that I read that really does an interesting job about, I think one of the takeaways is like, if you're a woman and you're not angry, you're not paying attention. That's how I'm going to summarize it. And the book is called Rage Becomes Her. And it's by Soraya Chemaly. And she includes all these different interesting statistics and research, which basically says how women are socialized from the time we're very young to disconnect and disengage from our anger. And not just girls and women, but any oppressed group, because anger, she says, is an access to power. So I'm curious from all of you, like, it sounds like you guys had a connection to your anger at a younger stage or when you were girls. And I'm wondering how you were able to keep that connection alive, or like what your relationship and how it's changed through the different stages of your life. So I know it's kind of an ambitious question, but I'm just curious about your relationship and how it's changed over time.
This is Jennifer. I will say that I was a very timid child. I can recall an instance like yours, Malika, where like kids were bullying me, and it's just like, oh, you have to do something about it. And it's like, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. And it's like, well, why are you okay with them hurting your feelings? And I think as women, we're always more conscientious of other people's feelings than I think we need to be. And I think that's what kind of quiets our ability to express our feelings or anger. So I would say, like, as I got older, I wouldn't say it probably happened in high school when I noticed that, like, I'm like, you know what? I'm done being nice. I'm done being nice to people that don't deserve it and that aren't going to be nice to me. And I think I carried a lot of kind of like the cultural, in my culture at least, it's like, Asian women in particular, we're known to be submissive and we just follow the rules and we don't stir the pot. And I got tired of not stirring the pot. And I've just gotten to the point where it's just like, I think at one point in time, my anger, like, I think once I got that power where I felt like it's okay to be angry, I like took it to the extreme though, like 0 to 100, where I'm like, it got to the point where people were telling me like, yo, you need to chill. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I do need to chill. And so I quieted it down for a while because I could see that I was getting outside attention where people were not comfortable with me speaking my mind or speaking against something that I didn't think was right, or if I was being mistreated. It's just all of a sudden I was too much. Like I was the loudest person in the room. And so I learned to kind of, make myself, more palatable, like you had talked about earlier, where we're just like, okay, well, let's not make people uncomfortable with who we are and how we feel. And so, yeah, it's just been a journey of up and down of, kind of figuring out, I think, Patricia, you said it earlier, or Rima, you just pick your battles. You're like, this is not something that I'm going to invest my energy in. I'm not going to be upset, angry about this. Kind of write it out, see how you feel later on. And if it needs to be addressed, you can address it at a later date.
Patricia or Rima?
Well, I can say that I still express my disagreement, or I think now, after I've done a lot of processing, and I'm not as angry of a person as I used to be in my childhood, because maybe I understand, I have a lot more self-awareness, and I can, and I know when I'm being triggered versus when something, requires maybe an angry reaction. But let me say that I am pretty expressive when things don't work out as expected with in the public. Like, for example, yesterday, I had left the parking and my ticket was validated. And when I put it in the machine, it said that I owed $6, which is this parking lot that has some messed up machines. And I've been stuck before right at the door thinking it's gonna like not ask me for more money, or I've paid the money and then right at the door it asks for more money and there's a line of cars behind me and I'm just gonna pay it so that nobody beeps their horns because I'm gonna ask for the operator or or the parking staff person. And I had, so yesterday this thing happened and I was just like, I'm not gonna let this go. And I went to speak with this lady and she didn't want to hear of it. She kept saying, I kept telling her I came in at 5 and I left at 7. And this is 2 hours and I have a validation. I shouldn't owe anything. And she kept saying, no, you came in at 4. And I'm like, are you calling me a liar? It says here 16:55, which is, whatever the time that's, what is that? No, that was the time I left, 16:55. The time I came in, anyway, this is in 24 hours. So 16:55 would be 4:55, right? And she's telling me, we're charging you for an hour. And I'm like, why are you charging me for an hour? Back and forth. I think I raised my voice and she told me to step out of her office. And then the security guard came and said, I'm just going to let you out. So I won. So I'm just saying, sometimes talking, when I'm right, and in this case, I was right and she was wrong, and and she wouldn't hear of it. A lot of time, the other people will settle down and will listen to you, and then I will settle down. But in her case, she was just not hearing of it. She's like, you owe $6, you owe $6, you have to pay the $6. We're not letting you out of this thing unless you pay the $6. And I'm like, I'm not gonna pay it. Now what are you gonna do? I had this machine, I swear, I think it asks for $6 anytime it's not, it's, I don't know what's wrong with it. I'm actually took the phone number and I'm gonna call the office, and I'm gonna, it's just because I use that parking structure often. It's, to me, it's a problem that needs to be resolved. You can't just, ad hoc ask people for extra money, and people pay because they don't want any conflicts. And that's sometimes what businesses do. They know that most people will not dispute things, and if it's to their benefit, they'll keep things as is. And I am very adamant about disputing things that are unfair, that are like not legit. And that's where I use a lot of my anger, and effectively, because I can win, with all my proof that they're wrong and I'm right. And basically compensation is the way to settle it.
Right.
However, even if it's $6, you know what I mean?
I'm not even going to ask you how much time all that took.
It actually only took, it literally took between the time I called the person and they told me, I called several times because they didn't answer, and they told me where the office was. By the time the security guard came, it was about 7 minutes.
So not too much time.
No, in this case, he was just like, I don't work for the parking structure. I'm the security, and I'm gonna let you out. And you're right. Like I'm sure he's seen this before.
Right.
Go into it other than you're right. Yeah. And her name is blah blah blah.
Oh, okay. Got some support. Yeah, like, let me give you more information that you need. All right, so we're gonna go to you, Patricia. Thank you, Rima, for sharing and being honest about the anger and showing how it is effective when we use it intentionally and wisely.
Yeah, so I just have to say, Rima, that sometimes a security guard like that has now really stopped a potentially violent confrontation. Not that you would be violent, but that was the reasonable thing to do, to open that gate and let you out.
Exactly.
That security guard was either well trained or smart, or had seen this before and knew what would happen if he didn't. That thing. I mean, how many things? You could crash through the gate. There's so many things that go awry, right? There could be violence.
I mean, I was just saying, if you're not going to do it, call your office manager and do it. But yes.
But the security guard really, and that's maybe can I tell a really quick security guard story? So I worked at a clinic where there are people from everywhere. They can walk in, it's called Carolyn Downs, and they can walk in and get care no matter if they can pay or not pay. And it's just a really fabulous place. Sometimes a patient could be threatening, rarely, but they could be threatening or to staff or to me. So when I first started working there, a patient was threatening, and so I ran out of the office and I ran and got the security guard. This big burly security guard who's of course a teddy bear, but he looks like he could be dangerous. And I said, "Hey Barry, there's this person in there. Could you come in the room?" And he said, "You know what? I don't usually go in the room. I'll wait outside and you go in and, try to diffuse the situation, and see what you can do. And I'll be right out here if you need me." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went inside and, diffused the situation, talked. Being out for a few minutes helped the person's anger come down. And I didn't need him. And I never ran and got him after that.
Mm.
Ever, I never had to get him after that. I knew he was there. And it was like, oh, right, I can do this. And so that security guard, just like you, Rima, it's the security guards can really help you in angry situations by not intervening, by supporting you.
Yeah.
You know.
Right, right. So when is the time that somebody's called security on you, Patricia?
Oh, nobody's called security on me, although maybe they should
What's your
have.
anger story?
That's great.
Do you have a story like that where you lost your cool, and how did it play out? What happened? And how did it
Yeah, so I grew up, but now my hair's not red anymore for people who can't see my hair, but it's white, but it was bright red. So I was a redhead, and redheads, people think redheads are quick to anger, you know, and that the redheads have a real temper. So maybe I was treated that way, maybe I wasn't, I really don't know. But when I was 5 years old, it was 1960, and we had just gotten a television. So I must have been watching things on television which affected me, because I thought that if President Kennedy didn't win, if Kennedy didn't win, it was going to be terrible. And so I was on the playground. We lived in the projects. We lived in a low-income housing project in Queens. And I was on the playground, and this little girl who I knew, I think her name was Janine, but I don't really remember exactly. And she said, I'm going to vote for Nixon. And I think she had a Nixon button on. And I got really angry with her, and she wouldn't change her mind. And I think I was telling her all these reasons or whatever. And she's, no, I'm going to vote for Nixon. No, I'm going to vote for Nixon. And there were these chains that guarded the grass, you know. Children should not play on grass, right? So they had to put little chain things around them. And she was swinging on a chain, because that's what we used as swing. She was sitting on the chain, and I took my hands and I pushed her over. And I remember she didn't really get hurt, but then she looked like, oh, and then she started to cry, like, you know, and then the next thing I know, I'm home. I'm like sitting looking at a book or something, and the doorbell rings, and it's like, Patty. And it made me apologize to her. And I said to my father, but she was going to vote for Nixon.
Oh my goodness.
And I was so angry. And I remember my father looking almost like proud, you know, like, oh, that's what the fight was about. Like, good job.
You were right.
Right, as it turned out. But I learned then that you really couldn't push kids over if they didn't agree with you, even if it seemed really important for them to agree with you. Yeah, but there was, you know, I would have yelling, screaming fights with my siblings, like yelling, screaming, until we were like in our 30s probably. But then, you know, but raising my own kids is when I learned about anger and appropriately, you know, discussing things and feelings and saying, you know, so connecting with somebody's feelings and connecting with my feelings in order to you know, get what you need.
That sounds like a really rich area to explore. And I think that's the interesting intersection that I'm learning between anger and getting what you need and your feelings and sorting out those things. And part of the reason it sounds like, okay, so let me just say that in Rage Becomes Her, she talks about anger, assertiveness, and aggressiveness. When a woman expresses assertiveness or aggressiveness, it's all collapsed in under anger. Right. And these are all things that are about expressing yourself, about, you know, about expressing your needs, about expressing a form of power, basically. And so I'm wondering how you all navigate, like, of course, you guys said about picking your battles, how you navigate inside if you feel angry, now, then what? How do you navigate or cool yourself down? Because one of the things, like I said, I come from a family that's fiery on my mom's side, but part of that, they all had high blood pressure also. You know what I mean? So it's like, right. So it's like, how do you tame that fire so that you don't get burned by it? Right? Because you can cook with it or it'll burn the whole damn thing down. So I'm just curious, like, how you all are using fire, that anger, constructively.
So I would say this is Jennifer. I used to be very reactive, and I saw how detrimental that was to my relationships, both professional and personal, where if I didn't like something, I would just snap, because I would just say how I feel in the moment without considering the consequences. And I think that was a big wake up call, like, well, you're hurting people, you're hurting your relationships. So I've come to find, especially in a professional setting, if something happens and I feel angry or upset about it, I sit with it for a minute. And I ask myself, I'm like, am I PMSing? Am I hangry? Like, is this validated? Like, is this something, if I sat here for 10 minutes and just scrolled through TikTok or something, got my mind off of it, if in 10 minutes I'm still going to be upset about it, that's when I address it. I've come to find some kind of balance between not being super reactive, but then also ripping the Band-Aid off. So for instance, there was one day at work where I was feeling very overwhelmed, not supported by my teammates. And I just was like, I have to say something now before it implodes. And so I pull my boss aside and I'm like, hey, this is what's going on. It's not fair. And this is how I'm feeling. And these are going to be my future actions if things like this continue. And then things got way better, right? He acknowledged it. He was like, oh my God, I didn't know. Thank you for telling me. And so I think there's a very fine line between like just doing it and saying it and getting over it with, versus like, okay, like letting it sit with you for a second and then thinking of the appropriate way to address it. Because it could have gone either way. I could have just cussed him out and left. I could have been like boom, boom, boom. And I've done that before when I first started working for him. I'm like, I'm gonna just pack my shit up and just dip. Like, I'm gonna just leave. And now I'm like, okay, I'm obviously not gonna just leave. That's unprofessional. And there's patients in the chair waiting for me and stuff. But I found that kind of learning how to express my anger in a healthy way is what gave me power. And it's helping me to establish boundaries with people. Like, hey, this is not okay. This is okay. Or you've seen what could happen. I could snap. I could, firecracker. And in the beginning, I think when I realized how afraid people were of my anger, I weaponized it, I'm like, do you want me to snap? Because I'll snap right now. I've gotten to the point now where I know, Malika, if I am PMSing, I'll come to work and tell people. I'm like, hey, it's Shark Week. It's that time of the month. I'm going to be moody. It's nobody's fault. Please don't take anything personal. And that's kind of my way of taking ownership. Like, hey, I'm doing my best to keep my feelings and anger in check, but it might just spill out, and know that it's not you. And I'm apologizing in advance. But I think me saying it out loud too keeps myself and my anger and feelings in check.
Thank you. That's deep. I for the first time ever last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, there was just this general anger. It wasn't because something happened. And I was like, ooh, anybody could get it today.
I think that way sometimes too. There's times where I'll be walking down the street and I'm like, I wish someone would start something with me. I wish they would so I could just go off, And I don't know why. I can't explain it.
Yeah, me neither. I had no specific reason. That was the first ever where I was like, wow, I'm just hot. Okay. Patricia, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, sure. In terms of PMS, actually what I would tell my patients was that what you're angry about is real. It's just that it's magnified with these hormones. So not to discount it, but to say, oh, this is an issue. Maybe this is an issue I've been ignoring even, so that's and that's what I learned for myself as well. I mean, these were always real issues, but maybe I overreacted, I could say, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know, but so in terms of when I get really angry or when I feel angry, I in the moment, I'll take real deep breaths. I'll do that deep breathing and I'll ask myself over and over again, what do I need? What is it that I need? What do I need right now? And sometimes I don't even know until later. I can't quite figure it out. Why am I reacting like this? What is it that I need? And sometimes it's not something I need, like food or rest. A lot of times it is, or love. It's that I need, it's that I'm hurt because of loss. It's something that's bringing up loss for me. And I think when I was 5 years old, and I was in the projects and I learned how to fight. I was a real fighter. I was really scrappy. And I could, even though I was really tiny, I was tinier than most of the people when I was 5 thought I was 3, because I was really little. I could totally stand up and protect myself. And I would also protect other kids as well, because injustice was also a thing. If there was an injustice, I was going to fight it. But what I think the reason it was really centered in loss, because my mother had mental illness and was in a psychiatric facility for almost a year when I was 4, and I was sent to my grandparents in California. So I had to be away from her. So I think it's that almost a threat of loss or a threat of separation. And I'll realize if that's happening, I can become angry. And I wonder if that played out at all on the playground, if there was just that underlying sense of loss. So it's like, what do I need? Where is this really coming from? And also the other thing that I do is it's like, okay, what percentage is me and what percentage is the other person? So with my husband, a lot of times now I'll say, this is 100% you. This is all you. That's all there is to it. All right, 99% you. And he'll be like, okay. Like that, because it used to be, it was like, what's my part in this? What am I, why am I causing him to do this? Or what can I do? How can I make this right now? It's like, there's nothing I can do. after 43 years, there's nothing I can do. You have to do it. You have to change. You have to do something. So that's the other thing. Like, what is me? What can I do about this? And what is the other person's?
Thank you. And same question for you, Rima. How's your relationship with anger? And as far as how do you manage it now when you feel upset?
Yeah, I mean, again, for me as well, I think at a young age, it was very related to loss and me managing the loss instead of emotionally being in charge and just going after things that belong to me. And I think for the most part, it started I think I left some stuff and someone came, I was playing in front of the house and I left some of my things in front of the house and I went in, and then when I came out, they were gone. And my mom yells at me. She's like, she's like, it's all your fault because, you shouldn't leave things. And, and that made like loss such a big deal, as opposed to, don't worry about it. I think with my kids, I didn't make it such a big deal when they lost things. I was like, don't worry, it's just stuff, we can replace it. But for her, it was like, oh my God, you lost this because you didn't take care of your things. So yeah, so loss was a big thing. And if it happened immediately, the survival, self-protection, came up as anger. And of course, it has a lot to do with also unfairness, connected to. So if people accuse me of doing something that I didn't do, I think that immediately flares up into an angry reaction. It's not about people agreeing with me. It's more about, unfairness and loss, like the whole connection. That's a big trigger for me. But it used to trigger me like I used to get triggered a lot more. I was mentioning, I don't know if I mentioned it to Malika, but I remember like getting upset because my dog was peeing in the corner, and I would get like, I would lose my mind, you know, because my dog is peeing, and what he was doing is he was peeing over what my other dog was leaving behind. Like she would like squirt a little drop of urine because she can't, you know, hold it, and he would come and pee on top of it, you know, for example. So the anger there is completely, you know, unnecessary, because it's not, he doesn't understand that I'm angry with him. And so you know, I think after taking some classes, I started doing this thing. There's this thing that we, in one of the courses that I took, you ask, you know, I'm upset because. I did a lot of that. I'm upset because. So I would take a minute and say, I'm upset because. And if, you know, and if at the source of the upset is like me and my feelings, and something can be shifted, you know, that kind of, I let it go. The upset was not worth being angry, you know, for, right? You know, I'm upset, you know, because if, so the 1 year where I did that a lot, every time I got upset, I did that. I was able to let go of a lot of unnecessary anger that just came up all the time for me. Yeah. So that's the main thing. That's the main thing. And I think you mentioned something about I don't see the names here. Patricia mentioned something about other people's, I call it their shit and my shit. If it's their shit, it's not worth being upset about. We can't do anything about it. Right. So, you know, as long as I'm, you know, have self-awareness of what my shit is, and I will a lot of times, you know, acknowledge and like, you know, say, I'm sorry, you know, I reacted, you know, I take it back. It's just a reaction. But for the most part, I try not to react unless it's with a third party, like a big, you know, like, you know, it has to do with products, purchases, and monetary, you know, recuperation of loss through monetary means because of a third party that should be more responsible towards my, me as a consumer. That's where I, you know, let it all out in order, in, you know, like with reason. Yeah. But yeah. But you know, outside of that, because I'm never gonna be one of those consumers that, oh, I'm just gonna let it go because I don't like conflict. That's not me, right? So I'm always going to find a way of disputing things and recuperating financial losses that have been caused by other parties, especially if they're responsible.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like I'm hearing a couple of themes around loss, whether it's the financial loss or even loss interpersonally. And that was one of the things I think I shared with the ladies before we started. I'm reading a book called The Anger Advantage, The Surprising Benefits of Anger and How It Can Change a Woman's Life. And it's by several authors, the leading author being Deborah Cox, PhD. And one of the things they were talking about with anger is that anger is a sign, even if it's especially interpersonally, right? That the other person, that there's a connection with the other person enough for what they're doing to affect you so deeply. And so one of the things that they're saying sometimes is that that can feel very vulnerable when we realize that someone has, you know, has enough impact to influence us so deeply for us to like lose our shit. And they're talking about all these different ways that we can react to it. And so at the underlying part and why it's the anger advantage, though, is they're saying that really it's a signpost of connection and that there's not a need or something that's being met. And so I'm wondering for you all, like, especially in your intimate relationships and with those relationships that matter, how do you handle your anger, and because it can burn people, right? And are you a person you're like, I'll burn it up now and then I'll do recovery and apologize and clean it up later? Do I, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you navigate more of those intimate relationships where it is going to be a repeat? You know, you can't just cuss the customer service person out, you'll never see them again, but those that you have to be in intimate relationship again with. Whoever wants to go first.
I can answer that. It's very tricky. Let's just say, for example, for me, I've learned to let go of a lot of things, but there's a few things, for example, with my husband, that he does repetitively. For example, you know, he's not a great communicator. So he'll keep a lot of information that I should know to himself, and I'll find out about it when things, under urgent. He's like, as whatever, give you information on a per need basis. And that's not my policy or my expectation. Is I want to have the information ahead of time. One example is, for example, he scheduled a 5-week trip, and then he leaves the papers, and I don't know, 5 days after he leaves, I'm looking at the papers and it says 10 weeks, like he's coming back in 10 weeks. And I'm like, wait a minute. He wasn't here, but I called him, like, you said 5 weeks. How did it become 10 weeks? Stuff like that. It's just so frustrating because you keep repeating the same message. The message is, please give me. He's like, I saw it was wrong, and I was gonna tell you after I fixed it. Really?
So is he really coming back in 5, or is it really 10? And
well,
that part,
he's saying he's fixing it right now.
oh,
But
okay.
he never mentioned it. I actually looked at the time, and I told a relative of mine, you can visit me up until that point. And then as I'm reading the date, I'm thinking that's 10 weeks. So I'm like, I called him and I'm like, okay, you said 5 weeks, but this is 10 weeks. How come you didn't say anything before you left? Like, you had so many opportunities to tell me you're leaving for 10 weeks, but you never changed the conversation. You never changed the information.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I forgot. I meant to. It's always the same. I was just about to. And it's like, that's not the case. The case is he's just someone who does not like to share a lot of information until he is required to. And he thought I wasn't going to mention anything, or I wasn't even going to look up when he comes back until later. And by then it would be fixed. So it would avoid this whole conversation. But that's not what happens. So it's always the same thing. When on these situations, I can't just let it go. I have to say something about it. Now, picking a way to say it where I'm just saying, can you not do, I don't know what the request is. There's always a request that he not do that, which actually doesn't get, fulfilled on. But yeah, when it's frustrating, repetitive things like that, like a pattern, it's very hard not to react, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah. And I imagine that it can build, if it's the same thing over and over again, and that connects to some other things. But I'd like to hear from you other two ladies before I go down the path of control, which is another aspect of anger, right? Where we want control of somebody to do something a certain way, maybe. But to either of you two ladies also about those intimate relationships and anger and friendships and how it shows up, especially for like repeat offenses. How do you navigate those relationships?
Well, I've been with my boyfriend for almost 14 years, and he used to be the worst communicator. Like, similar to what Rima was saying, was just like, you feel like you're just beating a dead horse, where you're like, didn't we talk about this last week and the week before that and the week before that? And all you had to do is just open your mouth and just say it, right? And my boyfriend is literally the king of unbothered. You can't piss him off. He has absolutely no emotions outside of being happy. And, you know, sometimes he gets stressed at work, but like, you really can't get a rise out of him. And I think I can pinpoint, like, he's the reason why I've chilled out as much as I have, because we were total polar opposites, where I'm super reactive and you literally can't. You could insult his mother and he'll just be like, that's your opinion, you know? It means nothing to me, because who are you to me? But like, it used to be where when we would argue, I would try to get a reaction out of him. Because like when we were talking about relationships earlier, when you care about someone, they have the power to make you angry. Right. And so that connection, like if I didn't care about him, I wouldn't get angry at him. And I'm just like, why do you not care? Like, why are you not getting mad? Because I could feel my, like, you know, rage going up to here. And he's just like straight face, like, yeah, well, that's how you feel, and like can't be bothered by it. And so I think that's really helped to mellow me out. Because I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like so much is important and so much is not important. And he's really helped teach me how to pick my battles, where it's just like, there are so many things that are in your control and so many things that are out of your control. And so I just think, you know, for us, it's a learning picking our battles. Like if he does one thing that I can't stand, but he does it every day, and I can learn to live with it, and it's not detrimental, it's not hurtful, I can live with it. But other things, you know, obviously if they need to be addressed, they'll be addressed. And so I try to take that into my other relationships too, with like my friends and family. Like if there's an issue, I want to just talk about it. I don't want to get to the state where we get angry. And I don't know if it's just a Seattle thing. Like we're so passive aggressive too. You know what I mean? Like you internalize things. I had a TA when I was at UW, and he moved here from New York. And he said, wow, people in Seattle are so nice. I was at Starbucks holding up the whole line because I didn't know what I wanted to drink and I didn't know what I wanted to eat. And the barista said, oh, take your time. And he said, if I was in New York, the guy would be like, kid, you gonna buy the bagel, or you're just gonna stand there and stare at it all day, right? So Patricia, I get, you know, like it's what you're saying. It's like in different situations, in different environments, like you have to kind of evaluate how you're gonna react.
I think California is that way too. I think it's
aggressive. Yeah, there's times where I'll get a patient will come late and I'll be like, oh, no worries, I'm glad you got here safely. In my mind, I'm like, why the fuck are you always late? Like, you know, there's traffic, there's construction. You can't just fucking come 15 minutes late every goddamn time. But I'm at work, so on my face, I'm like, I'm glad you got here. Okay, let's just get started, you know? So it's situational.
The light turns red and, and the person doesn't leave and no one beeps their horn. Everyone's just standing there.
Oh my God.
Someone beep their horn. Like, can we beep the horn so the person is like not distracted and go? Everyone will stay there. And the light is green.
It's the passive aggressive. Nobody wants to be that person that's like, hey.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I'll honk. I don't care.
I don't get it.
I
will honk too.
Yeah, I will honk too. I'll count like 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. I'm like, no, I'm honking. It's been too long. Life is short. I can't be at this red light forever. Come on.
The light is going to turn red again and we're all going to sit here.
Yeah, and we're probably going to do it again because the person's still distracted.
The person is reading a long text or some magazine article in his car, you know, at the red light.
Oh my goodness, hilarious. Patricia, any now you guys are this we've talked about now people that don't, right? We don't know that can still trigger us. But going back to interpersonal relationships, and you mentioned earlier, Patricia, about raising your kids and that being a really powerful process of changing how you emote and connecting to other people's feelings. So can you share more about that or another story that speaks to that growth?
Yeah. And so my husband and I took parenting classes because our kids went to public school and the school offered them. So we just decided to take them. It was meant to like keep kids off drugs, but they were really great classes. And one of the things that they taught was about, they had this whole song, you made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you're bad. Mistakes are for learning. And so in my interpersonal relationship, my husband is a person who he doesn't realize mistakes are for learning, and he'll feel bad about himself, which then he could take out on me, sometimes, and I would like be completely agreeable. Oh yeah, well, I did something, and now I'm like, no.
Oh, no, that's all you.
Yeah, that's your shit.
100%. 100% you. And so the kids and I were actually able to sing that song to him many times. And then the other thing, my kids learned, because they went to this school called Nova, which was an alternative high school in Seattle, and they learned about negotiating and how to mediate. They learned mediation skills. So once my daughter and I were in the car, and I'm getting really upset with her, and I'm like, Anna, no, and I'm doing my New York anger thing, because I was really mad that she left her stuff like all over, or she did something like this. And she looks at me and she says, Mom, I see that you're angry about, and I'm like, and they say to her, oh no, that me,
Wait, can you say that again? You went out for a second on my.
I said, you're mediating me. She was actually mediating me. Mom, I understand that you're angry because, and she got it. She could do it much better than I could ever do it. And she used I phrases, and when you are angry like this, I see, and it's like, I just want you to clean up your stuff. Isn't that a mediation thing? I'm angry because your stuff is all over the house. And so she got out of the car and slammed the door. But but it was like, and I see my son and his wife, they mediate, they negotiate. It's like, if somebody gets lost, nobody's yelling at the other person for getting lost in the car, and so it's incredible. So they've now become, I think they got a better education, and we got a better education than my parents did about how to express your anger, how to negotiate these things. There was an interesting thing, though, that happened to me when I went back to New York, and a friend of mine was commenting on how mellow I was comparatively. And I told them, about mediation and all this. They said, but then where's the spunk? So I think sometimes anger can be mixed with humor, and it can also engender relationships in the right way, like the person being angry because they're worried about you. They're angry because they're worried that you're going to trip over your shoe when your shoelace is untied on the street, so there are times for that where anger is caring, I suppose, but to have somebody angry in your face, or for me to be that angry, I don't think is good for me or the other person.
Yeah. I want to talk about, I want to kind of weave together a couple of things related to now women and anger and archetypes. So generally speaking, especially, after reading that Rage Becomes Her, it's like we can be gaslit not to feel the way that we're feeling. That's like a common thing. And oh, why are you so upset? Oh, it's nothing, like minimizing anger. And one of the things that she says in her book is that, like, to the degree that a society takes a woman's anger seriously is to the degree that they value and treat women well, basically. Like, can you hear and deal with our anger? And so I want to just talk about America is in a very interesting place now as it relates to women. And, some of the tropes that have been coming around are like the Karens, right? And one of the things I was thinking about is how anger can be misapplied, or it's easy to be angry at someone when you don't think that there's going to be consequences versus being and addressing the people you're really angry with. And so I think, like, for example, with Karen's, I think it's like a misguided or misdirected anger. And I want to talk about those experiences that you may have had of people because of the angry Black woman trope is another one, right? Where it's like, then people can minimize your expressions of anger because then it's like, oh, you get discounted again, right? And kind of get gaslit again. And so I'm curious about how you all manage that strong connection with how you're feeling and having the courage to express it in a society where we're constantly gaslit that we shouldn't be feeling the way that we're feeling. So like, if you have experienced that where someone's tried to minimize your anger or challenge you, how do you navigate that within yourself, and how do you express it in that relationship or in that conversation? Like Rima, you know, offered that example already with the parking attendant where she was challenging you or butting heads. But I'm just wondering of some other situations where you all do that as well, where you kind of maintain that integrity within yourself of how you feel, whether people are gaslighting you or not about it.
I know, if I'm speaking for myself, when people tell me, oh, you're overreacting or whatever, that doesn't help with my anger. It does not, that is not the right thing to say for me to, you know, that is not what you want to say to someone who's angry, is you're overreacting, you know, because that's just going to make that person more angry, because obviously they don't think they're overreacting. I mean, how many times they're going to say, oh, you know what, I am overreacting. Okay, no problem. No, what you have to say is you have to
But Rima, they do it because it works. For some women, that might be enough.
It doesn't work on me.
Yeah,
you know what works? Yeah, it doesn't. That would not work on me, because if I'm angry, I want to be heard. Mm-hmm. So what would work on me is for someone to actually say, "I hear what you're saying." You know, like that guy that you know, the person that listened to what was I complaining about and said, okay, I have a solution for you. That's the one that's gonna get me to calm down. So I don't know. So that's, I think they do address that in I know, like when I call customer service a lot of time, it used to be, oh, you know, hold on, you know, why are you so over, you know, you're over, they don't use overreacting, but they say, you know, can you calm down, ma'am, or something like that, right? And now if you like 10, you know, like decades later, they'll say, I hear you, ma'am, and I apologize, or they'll soften it up. Mm-hmm. That's I you know, so I don't know if gaslighting works to calm people that are usually, you know, outspoken about where they stand. Mm-hmm. That's what I want to say. I don't know. So, because that wouldn't work with me. Yeah, you telling me I'm overreacting instead of telling me you know, I hear what you're complaining about. Let me see what I can do. Is one thing. One is going to make me calm down, and the other one is going to get me worked up. Because I'll say, like, don't even apologize to me. Like, tell me what you're going to do to resolve this. And that's usually with third-party people that I don't have any emotional you know, connection with. Now with family members saying I'm overreacting, I'm a lot more I don't back down on whatever I want to communicate, but I will change the manner how I communicate. That would be how I'm very clear usually on what is it that I, you know, the message that I want to give. I'm willing to give that message in a very calm way if you're going to hear it and then make a judgment about it. But if you're not willing to hear it under any circumstances because you don't want to, you know, then I'm going to find a way to deliver the message. First, I will deliver it in a calm way. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to try to dominate and deliver
your
it in an
dad.
authoritative way, because that usually
Like your
works. If it hasn't worked in the past, I would have thrown away that method myself, right? That method, I would say, works 7 out of 10 times, and I'm being conservative.
So as I was a woman physician, I would always work with female teams as much as I possibly could, because there was so much male privilege and so much gaslighting going on. And women doctors were always labeled as these angry women doctors, to the point when I was at this one clinic, not Carolyn Downs, I must say, but at a major, large, clinic, where I specifically was working with other women physicians. We had an all-women team, and the guys on the other side of the clinic labeled us the PMS team. They literally, they called us the PMS team. Their nurses did, their medical assistants, because they were always dumping on us, because we got the hard patients, we got, and we would always take it. We would take more and more. We were there later, we got there earlier. It was, and we would make suggestions for the clinic that would be completely gaslit. So finally, one day, I just said, okay, this is enough. And we banded together. And I think that's what helped the most. When women can get together and they can say, they are labeling us as the PMS team. We are going to call ourselves the most excellent team or the best team. And we did. We rebranded ourselves, and we took control over the things that we could have control about. And then luckily we got a manager who wasn't going with the guys and saying, oh, you're the PMS team, you're always complaining, but said, what do you need to do a good job? You do a good job. What do you need? And then when we rebranded ourselves, that really helped. And then later in life, when I learned about male privilege, heap heating, the heat heating that went on in meetings was unbelievable. A woman.
Can you define that really quickly for any listeners? I mean, it's pretty intuitive, but break it down.
Yeah, so a woman physician would say, okay, if we want to screen for chlamydia, we should just have the medical assistants collect urines. We should just do chlamydia screening. No. 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes later, sometime, guy, let's call him Harry because that was his name. And he would say, yeah, why don't we just have the medical assistants collect yours? Oh, great idea. And then and that would happen all the time. And then the mansplaining, okay, where you would say something, everybody knew what was going on, but then they would talk about it as if you didn't know what was going on and explain it to you. It's like, so I quit that clinic.
Don't explain it to me, because I can explain it to you better than you can explain it to me.
I know.
They always attribute your anger that you don't understand what's going on. And I'm like, I completely understand everything that's happening. That's why I'm angry, and you're going to hear about it.
Right. So how many years I was the angry woman physician representing all angry women physicians, it's like a representative.
Yeah. And then I like what you said. You were saying, I guess it got to a point where you took a decisive action and you quit, huh?
Well, yeah. I mean, we banded together. We got everybody together, and it was really the most wonderful, lovely team. And then there were changes in the organization that made it great. And then they stopped those good things that were happening, and we got a new manager. And then it was right back to where it was, as if none of that had happened. Yeah.
You said, I'm down, I'm out of here.
Yeah. I was gone. That was it. Yeah.
What about for you, Jennifer? What you shared earlier, I really appreciated about your transparency of, hey, I'm PMSing or this is going on. And so I'm wondering, even though you sound really clear and you're within yourself and how you communicate, has there been those experiences about being gaslit, and how did you handle that?
I can't pinpoint any real incident where I feel like I've been gaslit. I think within my professional career, the last few years, I've really learned to assert my personality and my boundaries when I work with people. So I think for the most part, in all aspects of my life, I come across as someone not to mess with, because I'll end you, okay? Because I know all the gossip, I know everybody's everything, and I'm not gonna do it. Don't make me do it. I don't want to do it, but I can. And so I think if I have demonstrated any kind of, expression of anger, people know better than to cross me, and so I think, which is why I was so quiet during the gaslit thing, because I don't feel like people challenge me a lot, like in a meeting, people aren't speaking over me. They're not, taking my ideas and trying to pass them off as their own. Just because I've established myself and my personality as someone like, I don't give a shit. Okay. Like, I just don't. I mean, I'm aspiring to be, at the level my boyfriend's at, where he's just completely unbothered, because I think the reason I haven't been put in these positions is because God knows how I'm going to react. And nobody wants to see any of that play out. Like, we see these Karin instances, and I'm like, why wasn't I there? Like, I wish I was there, because I would have done X, Y, and Z. But X, Y, and Z could turn into something,
Right.
like violent. Like I could be in jail, because at some point, like, I care, but at the same time, I don't care, about consequences. So, I mean, when I see red, and I try to keep myself from getting to that point, because that'll be like, a point of no return. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have anything to contribute as far as being gaslit.
Okay, so we have just a little bit of time left, and I really want to, because there's such a wealth of experience and knowledge that you all have. I want to go back to Jennifer, something you said much earlier in our conversation, when you said how you experienced anger, and then you said, these are the things that I want, or these are the things that I need, or, you were very clear and set some boundaries. This is what I will put up with. This is what I won't put up with. So I want to talk about, as we kind of taper this conversation down, like, what are the gifts that anger has given you, and how have you harnessed it over this time? So what are the gifts, and how do you harness it? For those that are listening, like, I used to be afraid of my anger, which means really in some forms I've been afraid of my own power, right? So, like, what are the gifts that you all can share with some of the listeners that may be where I am right now with it?
Well, I would say one of the gifts of anger is just empowerment, self-empowerment, not allowing other people to belittle you or how you feel, your role in society, or your role in your office, your role in your relationship, asserting yourself, your importance. I think really just being able to harness how you express your anger and how you use it is a gift. And everyone starts somewhere, right? Because like I said, I used to be very reactive, and then I would go to internalizing and like, oh, I'm obviously overreacting. And then you're finding that balance where it's like, this is an opportune moment to express it. This is something like, we'll put it away. It's not that big. Let it go, kind of thing. So I think, anger gives you balance. You're not going to be happy all the time. Not everyone in your life is going to treat you well. And sometimes anger helps you get your point across in a more assertive way, versus just being like, okay, well, I'm going to internalize, like, what part of it is mine? Maybe this is all my fault. I obviously did something, and it's just taking, ownership of your anger and making it work for you in your benefit. And I think at some point, like, we need to just give up the whole like fear of being labeled angry. I don't care at this point. Call me angry. You can fight me to the death. Okay. I don't give a shit. Like, let's fight, and then we need to own it. We need to own it.
I got you, Jennifer. I got your back.
We just have gotta
Yes,
own it. And
own your
there's so
anger.
many gifts to that. You learn so much about yourself in those moments of anger too, where you're like, holy shit, like there's times where I didn't think I had it in me to say to my boss or to a friend or a family member what I was really thinking. And that is so empowering. You
Yeah.
learn so much about yourself when you get angry.
Mhm.
But then there comes the challenge of, you know, navigating it and having it work in your favor, and not letting it overcome you.
Yeah, I think that the gift of anger for me has been that it allows me to say, what is it I need? And say it's okay to get what you need. You're really not asking for too much. And maybe that's where the anger comes from, is like, I'm not asking for a lot. And so it's okay to ask for that. It's okay to get what I need. Whereas my whole life as a woman, you know, I've been giving to other people what they need. You know, I don't ask myself, what is it that I need? It's like, what do they need? You know, what can I give to them? And I would have to, you know, what do the kids need? What does my husband need? What does my family need? What do my siblings need? What does everybody but me need? And so now it allows me to say, what is it that I need? You know, and so I feel like that's the gift of anger for me.
Mhm. Um, and it's the same thing. I mean, for me too. There is um, there is a lot of empowerment inside of the anger. At least internalize it. At least, like, even if you say, you know, I'm gonna prove that I'm this, you know, for example, you know, if you've been belittled, you know, you're not as good as, you know, you're told you're not as good as you actually are. Or I remember the first time my father yelled at me because I didn't get good grades, right? And my grades were not bad. They were good except for one. And he would say, well, how come you got, a B on this subject? And it would just like make me that um that emotion. I thought was also like anger. I'm going to prove to him that I'm, as you know, better than what he thinks, you know, because why is he picking on me? But so it always motivated me to do better, to express it, to tell people how I feel in terms of where I am, to express, my this whatever it was that I felt disappointed in, to express that. I've always felt empowered with the anger. Now, as Jennifer mentioned, over the years, it was to my benefit to actually pick my battles, obviously, but it was always over, making, I apologize about this, making sure that I'm heard.
Mhm.
I'm heard, and I'm self-expressed.
Mhm. One of the exercises from the anger advantage I started doing, it was like talking about physicality and expressing anger. Like basically, because one of the things is like, now that I'm more connected to it, sometimes I don't trust my impulse of like reacting and expressing it. And so one of the things that they say is a constructive way to like take the edge off, right, and get clear about what you're angry about and to release some of the charge is to like do physical things. Like, for example, taking ice and throwing it at a wall just to like let some of that energy and burn off. And one of mine has been whether I'm angry or not. This was my intuition was like, whether you're angry or not, do this every week. So the one that I picked has been like hammering nails in a piece of wood and just like, hammering the shit out those nails. And I don't feel angry, but one of the things that I've noticed from doing it though, is like, I feel more energized. Like anger is like an activating force. And so I don't, even though I haven't felt the anger, just allowing myself the space to express it in ways that I normally haven't in the past has been so activating. Like you were saying, Rima, of even getting those grades or doing all that and owning it and saying I'm angry. So as we wrap up today with just the last couple minutes, I have this crazy idea to just, I'm going to reintroduce myself, and I'm going to ask you all to do this also to kind of maybe normalize it. Let's say, hello, I'm Malika and I'm angry. So just as we wrap out today, I'd like you all to close with that. And yes, and thank you for sharing with our listeners today.
Hello, I'm Patricia and I'm angry.
Hello, I'm Jennifer and I'm angry.
And I'm muted. I'm Rima and I'm angry.
Wait, but none of you sound angry. The only one who sounded angry was Patricia.
I know. I realized as I was saying, that, like, why am I smiling?
I know.
Like a
I
psychopath.
am angry.
I'm angry, damn it. I'm mad as hell. What's that movie? I'm mad as hell, and I'm not gonna
take it anymore.
I'm not gonna take it anymore.
From the network. Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences with anger. I really, really learned a lot. And it's actually, anger can bring people together. I feel really bonded. And there is so much fun and talking with you all today. So thank you so much. Patricia, Jennifer, Rima, 3 angry women and an angry woman in training myself. You all take good care, and until the next time. It's another episode of Feel Good, the podcast, and I'd like to leave you with a bit of a charge, inspired by Soraya Chemaly, the author, again, I've talked about earlier, and Rage Becomes Her. Embrace your anger, become comfortable with it, and then use that power for good. Bye for now. You can find me on Instagram at Ms. Malika Lee and thefeelgoodinstitute.com. If you are inspired and you want to take another step around coming into your power and want support around that, please contact me through the website. I do life coaching work, and I do have a workshop coming up on Tuesday, September 27th. It's a 4-part series on an introduction to A Course in Miracles. You can find out all about that and more on thefeelgoodinstitute.com.